Hiya, Richard.
Hello, you all right?
Yes, are you?
Yeah, not too bad.
Do you want to introduce yourself? We have had quite a bit of a chat
We have.
and a little bit of a giggle because I find that we have to, because we crack up otherwise, I think.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you introduce yourself to everyone.
So, my name's Richard Port. I'm a family partner at George Green Solicitors. I'm also the Birmingham Law Society president. And unfortunately, I specialise in domestic abuse cases.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
And you're also an MBE.
yes, I'm also an MBE as well. We've had a discussion
Right.
about this already, haven't we?
We have had a discussion about this. But we'll come on to that in a bit. I want to talk about because we have spoke about some things that are going off in family courts. And the way that I describe the majority of it is barbaric.
Yeah,
For a victim of domestic abuse, it is just barbaric. I've seen women coming at a court screaming, like it is just horrendous, isn't it?
it's and we've said about this. The problem you've got with domestic abuse in the family courts, and the phrase that I use till the cows come home, is that if you give a victim a shield, the perpetrator uses it as a sword. So we've got the Domestic Abuse Act, and it looks amazing. It looks like a brand new car kind of situation. But actually, once you open the hood up, you realise it's not a brand new car. It's an old car that's just had a bit of a facelift to it all. So we've got the same old situation. We've got DVPOs and DVPNs, so domestic violence protection orders and domestic violence protection notices. They've kind of rebranded them and tried to bring one into the Domestic Abuse Act. We've had them for ages. The police just don't know how to use them. We've got the full definition of domestic abuse. Again, it's not really anything new because the family courts were using it before. And we've got other measures that they're putting in place as well. But none of it's brand new. None of it kind of is like that amazing shining star that's going to solve all these issues with domestic abuse. And
Yeah,
what the family courts are facing is that perpetrators are going into the family courts, basically a wolf disguised as a lamb, pretending to be victims of domestic abuse. And
yeah.
we were saying that I think a lot of people, when I talk to them, and they're a bit shocked by this, but I agree, zero tolerance on domestic abuse, but I don't agree the zero tolerance to domestic abuse in the family courts, because the issue you've got, and if you think about the bigger picture, if you've got a perpetrator that's taking your child or children, they go to family court, they pretend to be the victim of domestic abuse, they raise it with the family court, and the family court then kind of put the book down and say, well, because they've raised domestic abuse, you're not allowed to see your children until we've done X, Y, and Z on procedure. That could be 6, 7 months down the line, then you actually even get any contact at all with your child. There's a lot of victims of domestic abuse that basically don't get to see the children because of what the perpetrator is pretending to have. And then when you do go down the line and you eventually then get to the courts and you provide all the evidence, because that's your opportunity then to provide the evidence that actually this person pretending to be a victim of domestic abuse isn't at all in any shape or form, the courts then take the view of, well, let's just forget about it. Just put it in the past. It's done now.
Historic.
Yeah,
It's
it's a start.
historic.
Forget about it. Don't worry about it.
I love that. It's
They
historic.
might
It
they
only
might
seems
have
to
lied.
it only seems to be historic when it's the perpetrator,
Yeah,
because it seems to be that when it's the victim, they want to go as far back as they can dig,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah,
Right from childhood. Oh, you had domestic abuse when you were growing
yeah,
up, and it's right. You need to go on parenting courses, domestic abuse
yeah, yeah, yeah.
courses, like jumping through hoops,
And,
isn't
and
it? And
this is the other thing, though, isn't it? Because no one wants to be a victim of domestic abuse. No one wants that label of domestic abuse on their forehead. So when you're in a relationship, you wouldn't then start preparing to gather evidence together to use then against your perpetrator, because most of the time victims are oblivious as to whether they are victims, but also they're
mm,
so fearful about consequences and about, again, most of the time it's blackmail from perpetrators, controlling coercive. that when they get to court and they try and raise that they are victims of domestic abuse, they might not have all the evidence there. They might have a little bit, but then the perpetrator's got a million and two things that they've kind of orchestrated and they've put together in a nice little package for the courts. And you just kind of think to yourself, well, clearly you were planning something all these years because you knew full well that this is your exit plan to try and get out and to try and keep that control in place. And most of the time it is, it's control, it's the blackmail, it's the if you don't do as I say, then I'm going to do X, Y, and Z.
Mm.
Um, and it goes on, doesn't it? Because we've got the issue of post separation abuse. Um, and it doesn't end just at the point when the parties separate. And I think this is the big stigma that we get, don't we, from people from the outside of the domestic abuse world, where they kind of go, well,
It gets worse.
it
It gets
does.
worse more often than
Yeah.
not.
Again, it's scarier because you don't know what your perpetrator's up to. You don't know what they're planning or what they're doing in the background. Um, but it kind of heightens up. And the post-separation abuse issue, it's there. But no one quite appreciates that because they say, well, because you're not living in the same household as each other, then it can't be that bad, can it? Because you've got time to breathe and you've got time to kind of be yourself. But you're on edge. That's the problem. You're on edge
Yeah.
and you're panicking. Well, what's the next move they're going to do? Um,
But do you think that if the police got all their evidence and did everything right in the first place, it would already be there for court? Because Davo is like it's such a classic
but then that's even
act that
that's even more
perpetrators.
difficult though, isn't it? Because you think to yourself, how many victims of domestic abuse actually want to go to the police? And and also, say if you've got someone who works in, say if your perpetrator works in like a caring job or something like that, do you really want to ruin their life? That's what the kind of thoughts that goes into someone's head because they think, well, do I really want to kind of go that far? Because most people that I speak to, victim wise, I'm like the cricket on their shoulder because I'm going, just do it. Like at the end of the day, they couldn't care less about you in any shape or form.
Mhm.
They'd see you with just a clothes on your back. Just go ahead with it. And then I get told off because they go, I've got a heart. I wouldn't do that kind of thing. I'm kind. I'm like, well, they wouldn't. He or she wouldn't do that to you. So you need to make sure that you're protecting your back. Um, but this is it. You can only go so far with the police, and you can only go if you're not willing to go forward with the police and make that and take it to the next level, then it doesn't work. But
See, I find because I obviously support at that point of call as well. So
yeah,
when it is first declared, and the problem what we've got is that women don't report anymore because
no,
they feel let down. They feel that let down, and it's like I've got a case at minute, and she has reported all sorts, and 3 weeks later, he's still walking around.
yeah.
Um,
But then,
and she's just said, "I'm going to retract my statement.
yeah.
I can't be bothered with this. It's mentally draining me." Um, yeah, and she just wants to give up.
But then the other side of the coin is perpetrators use the police against victims
Mm,
because, like I say, I've seen a few times where people have given statements and then decided, well, we're not going to push it forward, but it's there logging. Everything is logged and logged and logged and logged. Um, and I won't, I'm not going to talk more about the tactics used by perpetrators because
no.
at the end of the day, it's giving people ideas as to what they can and cannot do. So, but the problem is, it's just not black and white domestic abuse. And I find from talking to some people that they do treat it like a black and white situation, that it's purely, well, he or she did that to her, therefore that must happen because that victim's put it forward. Well, one, you've got to ascertain, is that person telling the truth? Are they actually a victim? Is the evidence there? And what can be there to collaborate it? Because I
Yeah.
represent people as well who have been accused of domestic abuse, and the amount of times they've come to me and they've had apparently had all this evidence against them for domestic abuse, and then you see it and you go, no, there isn't at all. There is no evidence of domestic abuse there. So just because someone's told you it's domestic abuse does not mean that there has actually been domestic abuse in this. And this is the other thing, it's gaslighting. If I say to you now, you're abusing me, and you go, I just asked you to take the bins out. I didn't. I'm not trying to do anything. Well, no, but you're trying to control me because you're telling me to take the bins out. Well, I've done the washing up, and I've done this, and I've done. You're a narcissist. You're a narcissist because you're trying to control me as to what I'm doing. Well, I'll just take the bins out then. That's fine. But then that's the other thing. The term a narcissist has been fired at so many times, and I'll watch TikTok videos where they give these kind of like examples of what a narcissist is. Um, they breathe, they eat, they sleep, and it's like, well, that could cover the majority of people. So again, we're firing out terms. Perpetrators are then picking up on said terms and just firing it back at us, regurgitating the same thing and hoping it has an effect. And we're watering down terms as well by trying to cover the many rather than actually the few. Um,
Yeah.
so it is a difficult one.
Yeah. I want to talk about court orders as well.
Yeah,
So you know when court orders are breached,
yeah.
ho- how how often have you seen it where there's actually been people go to prison for breaching them? What's the ratio? Have you ever seen
Do you
it?
want me to be honest? All
Mhm.
right.
Of
So,
course I do.
well, I think the word is honest or reassuring. So the only time I've ever seen someone actually go to prison for a breach of a court order, it was in the newspaper, and this was years ago when I was younger. And this, I can't remember what newspaper it was, but it says mum goes to prison for breaching court order, and I went, that's a bit. I wonder what happened there. That sounds quite extreme. But when you
So
actually,
it weren't one of your cases.
weren't one of mine.
Right.
But when you actually then read through it all, um, you realise the fine print was that the mum had breached it about 80 or 90 times, kind of thing. It was repeated offence of breaching a court order. The courts do not like to make prison sentences. I've seen in financial proceedings where the husband is breached a court order, and they've literally had the bailiffs come in and say, look, I'm going to give you a suspended sentence, and if you do not comply with the court order by X, Y, and Z date, you are going to prison, and you're going to be going to prison for a week or two. But child arrangement cases, they don't really like doing them. And I think only in the severe of cases where it's constant breach, 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 where it happens. The issue you have is that it gets from judge to judge to judge. So we talk about
Yeah.
watering down. You imagine it gets passed on to 10 different judges because you've had
Yeah.
to make 10 different C79 applications for enforcement. Um, they kind of lose sight on what the bigger picture is, because if it was me that came to you, you're the judge, and this is the 20th time I've come to you for a breach of a court order, then you're going to get fed up, aren't you? And you're going to
Yeah.
go, there's nothing else you can do. You're going to have to go to prison. If I get to my 20th different judge, they don't really know the facts of the case. They don't really know what's happened, or I've got that background to them to say, well, you've come to me 20 times, you've constantly breached this order. I've got no other way around this now but to kind of show you what the consequences are. So, as much as I'm kind of talking to you honestly about the realism of that the courts don't normally go down that route with prison sentences, don't take that as a just don't bother with enforcement applications. Keep doing your enforcement applications. If you've got a perpetrator that keeps breaching court orders, don't kind of take the stance of, well, I can't trust the court to do anything, because you've got to make sure it's logged each time. If it's a minor
Mm.
breach, don't bother, because again, you're wasting your money on it. Any solicitor you go to will tell you exactly what you want to hear, because if they're going to take money off you, then they're happy to say, a minor breach, let's make an enforcement application, because they're
Yeah.
not bothered, they're getting paid. But if it's a major breach, if it's a refusal to return or whatever, then it's either an enforcement or you need to review the contact arrangements for prohibited steps. So just bear that in mind. Don't take me kind of blowing
I
the
have
balloon
seen
down.
Yeah, I've seen on one case where she got community hours.
How severe was that then? Was that like constant breach of
No,
court
no,
orders?
no,
Really?
no. Yeah. No, it weren't that. No. Sometimes do you think that, like if a do you think a judge could take an instant dislike to somebody?
I've had
And
it a few times. I know it's hard to
uh,
believe.
yeah,
Um,
but also the fact that the more you challenge, the more they don't like you. So
yeah, yeah,
it's kind of making an example of you, and it was that scenario.
yeah, yeah.
But all she was trying to do was safeguard her child.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a few times I've had to go into court and the judge hasn't been able to control that courtroom, and I've had to control that courtroom. I've had on occasion where we had screens up, and Dad kept trying to move the screen and trying to because he knew full well that Mum had PTSD from the situation, and he tried to move the screen, and me being me going, no, not doing that, no, no, stop now, and the judge goes, that's that's for me to say, Mr. Port, and then I'll turn around and go, yeah, please don't do that. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. And it's just like, well, why didn't you then? I've had to step in to stop a massive issue then happening. And then he kept doing it, kept doing it, kept doing it. And also I've had situations where, like I say, they're cross-examining witnesses as litigants in person, because that's what sometimes they do, the perpetrators. They decide I'm going to do it myself because I can do it myself. Of course I can. Um,
Mm.
and they've just gone down some weird and wonderful line. And I've had to go, no, not doing that. That's not even a question. You're not even asking a question. You're just putting forward your position, not a question. And the judge said, no, that's for me to say. I said, well, why didn't you then? I've had to jump in. You've not jumped in whatsoever. As much as that person is a litigant in person, it is still a courtroom. We still have the same rules, regardless of whether you're representing yourself or not. So again, it's because with judges, I'm gonna do that Wizard of Oz thing. I'm gonna open the curtains for you, right?
Go on.
Do you know what the training is to be a judge?
No.
All right. So
Go on then.
go on
This
then.
this is
Let me know.
intriguing.
All right.
I bet it's not a lot, is it? Is it like I think is it ex-solicitors,
Oh,
ex-school
no, well, no.
teachers, things like that?
You can be a deputy district judge, and you
Right.
work part time as a judge and just sit on occasion and stuff. So to be a judge, the quality they look for is peacekeeper. Not lawmaker, not law decider, it's peacekeeper. They can teach you the law afterwards. That's not the issue. Can you keep the peace in a courtroom? So we have on the exams and things like that, the answers that you have. So we'll do this. I'll do a mock one with you. All right. You tell me what the answer is. All right.
Oh God.
Right. So you're a judge in a courtroom, okay, and you've given
Mhm.
this decision as to an order, right? Say for example, and he or she, the respondent, kicks off at you in the courtroom and starts swearing and shouting at you, right? Your options are this.
Right, go
Do
on.
you do this?
I'm glad I've got options.
All right,
That's
your
good.
options are this, right? Do you call security in and get him tasered, right?
Right.
That's A. B, you shout at him as loud as you can and then take him down. All right. C, you hide under your desk, all right, and pray to the gods that someone comes in. Or do you say to him, the case is now over, I've made my decision, and then you leave through the back door?
Well, I'd want to say A, but I know it's
It's
D.
D. So that's the answer. So basically you take the abuse and then you just kind of pander and just say, it's all done now,
But
I'm leaving, I've made the order.
does that abuse not actually tell that judge something that like does it not
But
common
again,
sense?
that's probably why they're getting the abuse because they made an order that person didn't like. Um,
Yeah, but the thing is as well, you can't hold them accountable as such, can you? So
no.
that decision is it.
I
That's it.
I had one the other day, and on this scenario, what happened was that we had a CAFCASS report, and mum had raised all these concerns about dad, and the children had raised these concerns about dad. And CAFCASS had said that the children were being influenced by mum because dad was adamant it was not the case, right? So
Mhm.
then client rocks up at court and she says, I've got these recordings. And I went, oh, I'll listen to him then. Let's see who. And there he is, all in all of his glory, effing and jeffing at the kids. I'm going to burn down the house. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And da 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 da. So I go to his solicitor and say, are you sure your client didn't threaten to burn down the house? No, she didn't. He didn't at all. No, 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 of course not. I'm like, you're going to want to listen to this then, because this is a corker. So then all of a sudden, oh yeah, admits it. Yeah, I did. I did do that. Then again, didn't admit shouting and screaming at the children. And then the client then sends me another corker where he's there shouting and screaming at the kids. Are you sure your client didn't do this? No, no, no. Because you've got a recording, haven't you? I'm like, yeah, I've got a recording. So we go before the legal advisor, and I say to the legal advisor that I want to play these, and they said, no, no, you shouldn't be allowed to play those. You've not made an application. As a legal advisor, you're going to really want to listen to this. So we played him, and then Dad's argument is that because it was not in English, his argument was that he didn't threaten to burn down the house, he threatened to burn down the kitchen. And the legal advisor then went, well, because there's clearly an actual difference with that in any event, because that makes it all better. It's only the kitchen. So then what happened was then he had to do domestic abuse program, he had to do anger management program. So the first few sessions he went to those programs and just blamed her for all of it. Blamed her, she was the problem, the kids were the
Yeah.
problem, and that was the issue. Um, so then he learnt the party trick. He learnt the disguised compliance to go, yeah, yeah, I'm the problem. Yeah, yeah, it's me, it's me, it's me. So then we went to a further hearing because he was only meant to have indirect contact, so sent horrible messages to the kids via letter. So we had that. We had then threats to kill himself and all that. So we go to
Yeah.
court, and I say I want his application discharged. And before magistrates, bench at top. And I said, look, at the end of the day, you've got these reports and they sound amazing. They look really, really good that he's engaged. But if you see the other report for the about 4 weeks into the course where he's not engaged and he's still adamant that he's the victim and all that jazz. So then the guy then starts saying the only reason I admitted domestic abuse is because I thought it would speed the process more. I don't feel like I'm a perpetrator. And then he starts shouting, swearing, and kicking off. And then I just go, no, not doing that whatsoever, not doing that. And then the court decided discharge of application, withdrew all the orders that were made against my client, and then we got a final live with order, and he just storms off. But again, you've just got to take control of a room. You can't peacekeep all the time because
No.
this is the end of the day. You've got to make a decision, right? Regardless of what the state of play is, you've got to make a decision about this. So peacekeeping only takes you so far in a scenario.
Yeah.
That's it.
In those scenarios, how can you keep peacekeep? How can you mediate with an abuser?
Yeah.
It's not
But
possible.
this was the other thing. Do you remember when they were talking about mediation being compulsory for everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, because I did a bit of a campaign on that to say that's absolutely ludicrous to even suggest that. All of a sudden, they then said, no, it's not for victims of domestic abuse. Um, but the amount of times I get solicitors on the other side when I've got a client and I'm saying no to mediation because it's not appropriate, they're then saying it's unreasonable that your client won't mediate. It's terrible. How dare they
Mhm.
not mediate with our client? I'm not, well,
Yeah.
for the email you've just sent, that's the further reason why. Because if they don't want to mediate, they don't have to mediate. It's not compulsory. It's a voluntary process, um, and they'll have to go to MIAM. You are required to go to MIAM meeting. But if you don't feel that you can mediate with your ex partner in any shape or form, then it's a voluntary process. You can walk away at any time. That's the whole point of
Yeah.
mediation. Um,
Yeah.
but I just remember that, and I could say when he said, "Well, we're not going to do it for victims of domestic abuse," I'm thinking, rightly so. Um, that absolutely mad to think that we'd have victims who'd have to be in the same room, same building as their perpetrator. Um, it's just crazy.
What do you think about the courts being opened up?
I don't agree with it
Why?
because as much as it's nice that you're opening the courts up to have this public hearing and stuff, the other issue is then that what do perpetrators like to do? They love to kind of air dirty washing, don't they? And to embarrass and to try and scare. So what's going to happen then if the family courts are open to everyone to hear things? What's going to happen to
Mm,
victims of domestic abuse? Because we've already got victims at the minute scared of coming to the police in case they've got to go to court and have this big trial to do with their perpetrator. If we then add the layer on to actual victims of domestic abuse, say, oh, by the way, if you go to court, your perpetrator, who's going to cause maximum damage to you as much as possible, is going to try and embarrass you as much as possible in order to cause discomfort. Well, that's going to be the newspapers could be involved in that, and it could be reported, and you're going to have people in there that you don't know, and people there watching and hearing your business. How many applications do you think are going to be made then?
yeah, but then on flip side of that, they don't like people to know what the behaviours are as
Oh,
well.
yeah, yeah. No, obviously, but again, you can't have it both ways, though, can you?
Mm, but then do you think that the courts would be getting away with certain things if they were opened up? Like sometimes the way that you've got to remember as well, Richard, that not all solicitors are like you.
And that's
They're not.
the issue.
That's
Like you
that.
say, I
Yeah,
get 100% what you're saying because again, the courts get away with what they're doing, but then you've got to do a balancing act, haven't you? You've got to think of the public interest in the sense of the victims not wanting to come forward because they're worried that it's not going to be it's going to be an open process. If the real concern is that you're worried about the judicial system behind closed doors doing weird and wonderful tricks. There's ways around to appeal such decisions. What I think is the more appropriate thing because we're kind of trying to create a problem where there is no problem. The big issue here is access to justice. That's the big issue. And the big issue is access to actual real solicitors and real people doing representation because we've got lots of law firms who do legal aid. And I know a few that are really good law firms, but I know more firms do legal aid and they're absolutely terrible because what they do, and
yeah,
there's no disrespect to paralegals and there's no disrespect to trainee solicitors, but regardless of whether I'm not paying for my legal service or not, I expect the same level, the same standard of representation as I would do if I was paying someone privately to do it.
yeah.
And a lot of the firms, what they do is a conveyor belt situation where the solicitor will see the client for one meeting. So we're in a meeting now. I'm talking to you, and I'll give you a little bit of advice. We'll have a 40-minute
Yeah.
meeting, right? You never see me ever again. You can never get hold of me by the phone. I don't email you. I don't look at your case. And what happens is a paralegal who's just come out of law school, no
Mhm.
experience whatsoever, no experience dealing with solicitors on the other side or court hearings or anything like that, they do your case. Trainee solicitors, again, who have just come to do family law, they do your case. Um, and they might represent you at court. And they've never represented anyone at court before. And again, they might be pretending to know what they're doing, but in the heart of heart, they're absolutely panicking about what the situation is. Um, but that's the problem I face. If you're worried about the courts getting away with stuff they shouldn't do, then opening up the courts to allow everyone and their dog to know about everyone's business isn't the way forward. It's making sure that people have got real representation to kind of police and say, Judge, that's not right. And I've had to do that a few times, and I've had to report judges a few times. I've had one where I
Bet they love you.
oh, well, I hope they do. I'm not that bad. It,
Are you bothered if they don't?
I'm not really because at the end of the day, I want to make sure my client's sorted, and this is
But that's the thing. We need more like that
yeah, yeah.
are going to actually represent like they
I
should.
I started out when I was 14 and I worked at a law firm in Derby, so Whitestone Williams, just to give them a bit of some credence there. Um, and I kept coming back as a different, so each year I kept coming back as T-boy, legal assistant, paralegal, and all that. And then I started my training contract after I did the bar course. Um, and yeah, I was scared as hell. You as a trainee, you go in and you don't know what you're doing really, and you're representing clients and you're in court and all that. And I think eventually, I don't know what point in my career, I kind of stopped caring. I kind of stopped, not in the sense of caring for clients, but caring about what others think in that
Yeah,
situation. I
yeah,
don't care about upsetting, and I'm not, like I say, we're talking now. I will fight for my clients, but in my real kind of personality wise, and clients will tell you this, that it's two different sides to me. Richard who's in court isn't the same Richard that actually talks to clients and deals with clients, and that's the way it's got
yeah.
to be.
Yeah, because unfortunately, I think a lot of legal reps haven't got morals, have they? That's the thing.
It's not a sense of we have what's called the cab rank rule. So you've got to take on a case. So if you've got a client who's been accused of being a paedophile, you've got to take on that case regardless. Um, because if again, you've got to think of it from the other side of the spectrum. Because if someone's been accused falsely of being a paedophile, they can't get representation, then who's going to represent them? So we get a situation where people are falsely accused on a day-to-day basis, and we kind of go, not touching this case because they're saying that you could be a paedophile. Well, well, it's not for us to judge. It's not for us to judge as to what the allegations have been made. For lawyers and barristers and all that, our role is just to make sure that we fight anything that comes forward. And if the evidence comes forward isn't up to bar, then it's like, well, you haven't got a case. There's nothing there. And the amount of times I've had cases where, like I say, people are falsely accused of domestic abuse, and the evidence that they've had against them points the finger at the fake victim, the perpetrator, and you just get so frustrated because you raise it with the courts and you say, that person's lied. Like it's adamant that they've lied about it. So we need to do something about it because again, it becomes a party trick. If they feel that
Yeah,
they can do this and get away with it, where do they stop? And it's only coming out to light now where we're getting actual criminal cases, um, whereby the police are taking notice that if false allegations are being made against people, because there wasn't I'm sure I watched the sentencing for someone recently because I'm sad and watched them on YouTube, um, where this woman had accused, I think it's 3 men over the space of like 10 years of rape and sexual assault. And it came out that the text messages that she had were created. Some of them she'd done off a false account, and the police had checked the IP address to find out it was at her house when these messages were sent.
right.
And these blokes were let off free because again, she'd made the allegations up. The evidence was all there, but the police arrested these men on the basis that they took it as gospel what she said because they didn't have the evidence to hand. And again, it happens for women as well. I've got clients, female clients, who have been arrested because their perpetrator have made false allegations. And then when you actually get into the nitty gritty of the evidence, it's quite obvious that none of it's true. And then the police, when they make a counterclaim and say, look, this is domestic abuse, the police have gone tit for tat, isn't it? We'll leave it. And you go, well, I've had to sleep in a cell for 24 hours. So how are you going to compensate me for that? Because again, you've locked me up on false pretenses.
Yeah, but don't you think that that's a small minority, ain't it?
It it's becoming bigger. That's the scary thing about it. We've got, like I said before, we've got more perpetrators pretending to be victims of domestic abuse. Um, and you know these backlogs with the courts that we've got.
Yeah,
That's the pure reason as to why we've got such big backlogs. Because you haven't just got one case that you're basically trying in relation to domestic abuse issues. You've got two cases in theory. So what should be a simple case that should only be 6 months, 7 months down the line, it gets more and more and more. And what should be a simple 1 day hearing turns into a 4 day fact finding hearing because you're hearing allegations from both sides with both bits of evidence. That's
Mm,
your problem. And we've got new laws in place now regards to controlling coercive behaviour in relation to the courts. Um, as to, do you know what a Scott schedule is?
yeah.
Yeah, so a list of allegations. Now, before we used to limit them to 6 allegations, and then under this new case law, we want to look at patterns in relation to behaviour. So they've said we can't limit allegations anymore. So you could be faced as a victim, you could be faced with 20 allegations against you, all nonsense allegations, but that perpetrator could put them forward and say they're all relevant and they all show a pattern of behaviour.
So what do you think is gonna be the answer to making the system better?
It, the answer to so it's not just the court system in itself. The bigger picture is everything. And we were talking about it before that anytime you have a conversation of domestic abuse, you normally just hone in on one subject. So we talk about young people being affected by domestic abuse, but we don't talk about elderly people who are affected by domestic abuse. We talk about how we tackle domestic abuse. We talk about trying to train and trying to help generations understand that whatever happened previously was not acceptable. But we don't talk about then speaking to young people about the red flags for relationship. Um,
Mm.
because again, I remember back in the day when you had talks about sexual education and things like that, no one sat down and said, "Oh, these are red flags." But we've got the training now. We've got all the material now to talk about red
But
flags.
it's not in the curriculum
Not
for
at all.
school, and I said it needs to be because if children are learning about sex education and things like that, then it should be in the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
curriculum
yeah. But it's never
to
discussed.
educate them.
And there's no excuse now though, because we've got say I've read the red flag, white flag book and all that jazz. Um, and the materials are there. And there's ways that we can kind of hone it down to children and talk to them about it. But no one really wants to do that because it costs money. It's,
I
it's
know,
money that apparently we don't have.
I
Um,
know, I know, and but the thing is, it's like the same old though, isn't it? We'll wait while it's crisis
yeah,
point
yeah, yeah. But
instead of putting the prevention measures in place and putting the money where it should
but
go.
that's the bigger picture, isn't it? Because if we teach the young about what's a healthy relationship, and also we teach them that it's not a taboo to talk about domestic abuse, then that's going to have a wide ripple effect moving forward because we're going to have less cases of domestic abuse, which means the police will have more time on their hands to deal with other issues and other cases, which means that we
Mhm.
free up money then for the police. I don't want to say we could have less police because that'd be absolutely ludicrous, but again, it's we free that up. We also free the criminal justice system because again they're trying less cases because there's less domestic abuse to have to deal with. Um, and then overall, there's less cases we have to deal with them for the family court justice system. The only issue that I've got that I think is a big problem with the family court justice system at the minute is the family court is a business and we're treating it like a business. So at the minute, you know how we had this big push on mediation, and I said before about domestic abuse victims and about we're trying to make it compulsory that everyone just goes to mediation. And the courts now, if they feel that they don't want to deal with your case, they can push you out to mediation if they want. Do you know why they're doing that?
'Cause they have to pay.
Well, do you know what the big reason is to, all right, say you own a business, all right? Let's just say this, you own a bakery, all right?
Mhm.
Your bakery is full every single day, right? You sell out every single day of the week, okay? So there's no worry at all about your bakery going out of business, but you're getting more customers, right? So what's the best way to kind of take the pressure off your business? You're not going to go bankrupt because you're going to sell out. Everyone loves your bakery, right? So what do? Rather than getting everyone in the shop, what do you do?
Well, you give it your work to somewhere else, wouldn't you?
Well, you've tried that. You,
Morally.
you tried and opened up some other businesses, but again, it's rampacked. You put a queue system in place, don't you?
Well, yeah.
But you can't call it a queue system because if you call it a queue system, it makes you look bad. So what they do is they send you to mediation in the hopes that, again, if you in the hopes that hopefully you resolve it. But most of the time, if you're going to family court, you're not resolving it, are you? Because you're going to
No.
family court for a reason because there's a dispute there. But
Yeah.
if I send them in the queue for a little bit, basically on hold, you're very important to us, but please wait. Um, and then if that doesn't work, then come to court. Um, they're not fussed at the end of the day. They've got work coming in, so they don't need people to have to pay the court fee because they know full well that if it doesn't work with mediation, they're coming straight to court anyway. That's the sadness of it all, and this is the problem we're
Yeah.
in. We're in a what's meant to be a personal family court isn't a personal family court because it's purely about money. And the amount of times I've had cases where they've been moved to different courts and we've said, no, we can't do that date. The court have said, well, if you want to move the date, you're going to have to pay a court fee.
Yeah.
But you move the date, not us. And at the end of the day, you've
Yeah.
told us a week in advance. Why do we need to pay a court fee for that? You move the date,
Yeah.
not us. So we can't attend. The client can't attend. Well, if you can't agree it, then you're going to have to pay £150 for a court fee for it. What do you mean? Again, it's
Well, I'll tell you this scenario, right? So there's an indirect contact court order, and there's been a few incidents where I've had to go to police because it had been breached.
yeah, yeah,
Anyway, there was this other incident, and no option but to go to police to go to back to family court, which cost 300
yeah,
quid. Um, and basically the judge went, well, people do bump into each other.
yeah,
That were it. 280 quid. See you later.
yeah, yeah.
So what's pointing? It's like they're not worth the paper they're written on, are they?
I've had
Really?
one where she's like said, I'm not going to follow the court order. You can't make me. I will do what I want. I don't care what the court say. And like you say, the client's paid money to go to court for enforcement on the order, and the judge just goes, "Eh, who cares? Let's just get along
Yeah.
with each other." And I said,
Yeah.
"Well,
Well, I
we
I
can't."
said that to I said that to a social worker, if I'm
Yeah,
honest.
yeah,
I said that, listen, I have got serious concerns about the safety of my
yeah,
child.
yeah,
And there is not you or anybody in this country is going to make me send my child somewhere where he is not safe.
yeah,
Because at the end of the day, who is going to hold their hands up and be accountable for that?
yeah.
None of them.
Well,
None of them.
everyone's scared. Like I said, I don't know how many years ago Baby P was. But that shook everything up because again they were so worried and so scared about the finger being pointed at them as to failings with the system that we put all these measures in place, so safeguarding letters and things like that. At the minute, have you heard of Pathfinder?
Yes.
So
Where
Path
the judges are talking to the child, aren't
well,
they?
so basically what's happening is so before we'd have the Section 7 reports and they would come probably midway through the case and they take 14 weeks to complete.
Well, they should.
Should,
Should.
should. Should take 14 weeks to complete. But now under Pathfinder, what we're doing, we're doing heavy load at the front. So what we'd have is a court hearing normally listed in 2 months. It's probably taking about 3 months. At the minute, they're very quick at the minute because they're trying to make this look great. But I'm skeptical of it because again, like you said, you automatically said to me then it should take 14 weeks to complete. And he went, well, it should do. Because you know full well half the ones don't. And that's because CAFCASS are so overworked. And now what we're saying to
I wondered when they'd get brought up.
yeah, now we're now saying to CAFCASS, or by the way, chaps and chapettes, you've got to do what's really a Section 7 report for every single case. Right at the start of the case, you've definitely got to interview the children. You've got no choice about it. And you've got to do it within a certain time frame, and you need to make sure that it gets done every single case. So now we're adding more problems to the issues rather than, again, I'm all for change and I'm happy with change, but we need to kind of take stock where we are with things. We can't really pretend that we were struggling before. Well, we weren't struggling before, and there was no problems. We were struggling before. So I've not done a Pathfinder case yet. So I've got a colleague that's done one, and everything came really, really, really quick. Um, but that to me kind of shows that, again, if you've got a pilot scheme for something, you are going to do it really quick, aren't you? Because you're not going to delay on it because you want to make sure that it
Yeah.
goes well. So, like I say, I'm trying not to be pessimistic about it. I'm hoping I'm proven wrong. I'm hoping it goes well and that we solve the problems with the family courts. But I can see now
Do you think that that is a possibility
that everything's fixed.
to solve the problems in the family court?
Um, I don't know. I'd love to say yes. I'd love to say that this is going to be amazing and everything's going to be fine. I'm 33 years old and I can still remember, and this, bear in mind, I'm only 33 years old. I can still remember when we drafted the court orders by hand and we did the tram lines and all that jazz. We've moved away since then, where we were then scratching out on like what's called a cap form, what the court order wants to say and adding some bits to it. Now we type it up. We were using bundles before, paper bundles. Now we're using electronic bundles. So we are making some progress with the courts and with the family justice system, but I think you've just kind of got to take stock where your weaknesses are and don't try and kind of make them worse, because I can't imagine they've hired more CAFCASS officers. So if I'm told actually with this new project they've hired thousands of new CAFCASS officers, brilliant. We've solved it then, haven't we? But if they're saying, well, actually,
What's your view on CAFCASS?
it's hit or miss. CAFCASS are hit or
Mm.
miss because, again, the safeguarding checks that they do on these 20-minute phone calls and things like that. Um, Again, how much can you take from a 20-minute phone call? I talk to you for 20
Not a
minutes
lot. Not a
and my
lot.
ex-partner talks to you for 20 minutes. Who are you going to believe? You know what I mean? You've seen no evidence. Um, Someone's made wild, frivolous allegations against the other. You're going to go with those allegations, aren't you? Even though you've got no evidence of it. And again, if you address those allegations with that other party, um, then the state of play is, well, they're going to deny him. But then what do you do then? So 9 out of 10 times when we have safeguarding letters, they take the side of caution. They take the side of caution because of baby P case, because again they're so worried that something's going to happen otherwise, if anything were to happen. But I'm hoping with this Pathfinder that the first letter that everyone gets from CAFCASS, thorough checks have been carried out, because on that occasion they are going to book meetings in with people, they are going to speak to the kids, they are going to speak to the schools, they are going to speak to the police, um, and at least then when we get to a first hearing, actual real work can be done to progress the matter, because most of the time when we
Yeah.
get to a first hearing you can't really do much because we've either not got the safeguarding letter or
Yeah.
we're just saying, well, it needs to go out for a Section 7 report. And the majority of times where I've gone to first hearing where there's not been a safeguarding letter, and I've said, well, clearly this is a Section 7 case, there's no doubt about it, we're not going any other way than a Section 7, the courts won't make the order for a Section 7 because they'll say, well, we haven't got the authority to do so because we haven't got a CAFCASS safeguarding letter. So it is a
Mm.
hit and miss, and probably a lot of the viewers for this who have to have deal with CAFCASS, they've either got a positive story, which I've had a few positive stories where the CAFCASS officer's taken the case fully on board and understands it, or they've spoken to CAFCASS, they thought things were positive, and then they've received a report that's absolutely opposite as to what's been said, to the point where they've been misquoted on things. And I've had
Yeah,
that. I say we talked about that case before where um, we had the recordings for the abuse.
yeah,
CAFCASS basically said mum was a lying toe rag. She lied. She made the kids say all these things. And if it wasn't for me stepping in to show the recordings from the client, these kids would have been forced to have contact with dad.
yeah. And then ultimately what?
Yeah. But again, mum had
Uh,
made it very clear. She'd made it very clear to her that, look, this is it, and speak to the kids because they can tell you firsthand what's happened. The lying.
but then that CAFCASS officer should be held accountable for that because, and that's another thing. It's there's no accountability
No.
anywhere for any of it, is there? Why did that CAFCASS officer not just say, right, okay, um, yeah, I should have listened to that and taken that seriously.
Yeah. I've had one where the safeguard letters come through and it's totally different names. And I've then said to them, well, clearly this.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I've had that were mine in my
yeah, yeah,
section 7.
totally
They even
different
got
names. And
got my children's date of births
yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
The
yeah.
names,
And
the
then you
surnames
argue with a
were wrong.
CAFCASS officer and say, well, clearly you've not done this report correctly. And they'll say, yes, we have. It's been checked. And you go, well, no, it hasn't, though, has it? Because you've got totally different names in this report. So if it's been checked by someone else, then how is it that two pairs of eyes have been able not to see that this isn't the actual parties in this case, and you've got the names wrong?
Yeah,
So what
yeah.
else have you got wrong on this report?
And I think as well, I've seen it where they're not taking school reports seriously enough
Yeah, yeah,
as well. If there's any safeguarding concerns, then there's something. And I just want to tell this for anybody that's listening. School have a CPOMs, and on the CPOMs is the school safeguarding
yeah,
concerns. So a lot don't know that they can access that, and that should be used towards
yeah,
section sevens
yeah,
and stuff like that. But there's sometimes occasions where it's not, where school are actually saying, you know, uh, I don't know, for instance, little baby Tom came to school this morning and he's I don't know, he's he didn't have a coat on and it were -3
yeah,
outside. It were on CPOMs. Um So, like, and mum or dad dropped him off. That should be there then as evidence. That is a safeguarding concern.
yeah.
They should be taking school reports more seriously because let's face it, kids are at school. What? The 50% of the
But do
time.
do the other side of the coin, right? We've just said that they haven't got enough CAFCASS officers, right? And you can imagine if they haven't got enough CAFCASS officers, then they've probably got a lot of work on. So, and it's the same with legal aid lawyers. A lot of legal aid lawyers take on so much work to even make a profit for their firm, but again, it becomes quantity over quality, doesn't it? If you've got so many on, and you haven't got time all the day to even focus on the bigger picture, you're going to just do the basics. If a court has asked you to
Mm.
do the basics of a report, it's just the basics. They're not really going to spend as more time than they need to, and they're definitely not going to ask the school to send through CPOMs and this and this. And that's the problem. We're doing the bare minimum, and we shouldn't be doing the bare minimum because the bare minimum leads to problems and leads to issues and leads to, in some scenarios, fatalities. Um, but then on the other side of it all, it leads to some families, like I say, women and men, not being able to have the contact they should have had because the fact is the perpetrators try to use the court system against them.
And the thing is that they're getting very clever and they know exactly how it
Yeah, yeah,
works,
yeah.
don't they?
And like I
And
say,
they know that court orders it don't make that much difference
like you
if they're
said, go
breached.
before a judge. They go, forget about it. It's like when they is it Goodfellas or like Godfather. Forget about it. Forget about it. It's fine. Forget about it. Um, it just again at the end of the day, they're not bothered because they get to a situation with the courts. They don't care if the courts say they're going to do something because they know full well the courts are never going to send them to prison unless it's really, 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 really severe. Um, they're not bothered, and that's the
I don't,
difficulty.
but I have women that are absolutely got the fear of God in them
Yeah,
that they will go to prison. They're gagged, which again, that is to go through what they go through because it's terrifying for them. It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely terrifying,
Yeah.
and the leading up to that hearing as well is
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's
horrendous.
panic, isn't it? Because and
Yeah,
I try and
but they're not
reassure.
allowed to talk about it.
No, because it's horrible. It's not a nice experience. As much as I'm used to going to court and stuff, it's not a nice experience for people, and sometimes I forget that because you just kinda go, "Well, yeah." You basically, you're in a room with people you barely know, and they're talking about and they're deciding your life. And what the frustrating thing is, if you've spent all this money on a solicitor, they prepared for the case, or they should do prepare for the case, but when you go before a judge and you get the sense that that judge hasn't read any of the papers or even looked
Mhm.
at the bundle with much detail, you
Have you ever heard a judge say, "Can somebody update me because 'cause I've not had time to read the bundle"?
no, they're not allowed to do that. Because the thing is, if you do that, so talking about appeals, if a judge makes an order and they have not read the bundle, then you can appeal their decision because you can say that they've not taken into account everything. I had a case once where an occupation order was made against someone, and the magistrates, being cocky as they were, because he said, "I want to appeal." I wasn't at the hearing, but he told the court, "I want to appeal," because they made this like it was ludicrous why they made it. The partner had been at the house for like 5 years, not paid any money towards the property, and had her own property and all that jazz. But the magistrates got cocky and said on the order that we've read through all the papers. So that was on the order, right? And then I went through the bundle, and the solicitor that had photocopied the bundle, the other side, what happened was they didn't photocopy it properly. So every other page of what this bundle wasn't on the actual bundle. So when the magistrate said they'd read the witness statements page to page, they couldn't have because they didn't have the witness statements page to page. So when we went for the appeal with the appeal judge, he said, "I'm going to have to grant this appeal because the magistrates have put in the order that they've read the witness statements and they've read this. They can't have read the witness statements because the bundle isn't complete. So I'm going to have to grant the appeal and stay the order." So in the end, that order got discharged because there was no way, no how that it was meant to be made anyway. But again, unless you've got the confidence to challenge that, and most people wouldn't have,
No.
because you just kind of take it as gospel, don't you? You see judges and you think that they bleed blue blood, um,
Yeah.
but actually they don't. They're human. Everyone's human at the end of the day. They've all got their own stories and all that, but that's the problem. No one's got the confidence to be able to say, "No, we don't agree with that." And the other crying shame is there's not many lawyers that have got the confidence to kind of start an argument about it either.
So what do you think that they need? Better training with domestic abuse
I,
cases?
I'm tired of going past law firms that say we specialise in domestic abuse cases, and they do
Do
not
you know what,
specialise in
Richard?
domestic abuse
I've
cases.
I yeah, and I've had them where they've approached us, and all it is a photo opportunity.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
look at
yeah, yeah,
us! Look at us. We support the domestic abuse charity.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
that's all it
see, I
is.
don't do legal aid anymore, but I help organisations with legal aid and putting them in touch with a legal agency or giving them a second opinion on stuff. I've got no horse in the race at the end of the day. I don't get paid for that. I don't get any benefit from that. I just know that actually someone out there is making, like, they're not panicking and not worrying. But a lot of legal aid firms, they reach out to try and help these organisations because, and this is why I have to tell these organisations, they're not doing you a favour in any shape or form
No,
because they want your work, they want your referrals, they want that case. Um,
and they want the status to make themselves look good.
it's not. Well, again, some firms are jumping on the bandwagon with domestic abuse victims because it's flavour of the month, isn't it? It does make them look good, um,
Hmm.
but it annoys me that they're not getting the treatment. As much as it's nice that it's on LinkedIn and all that jazz, that we help victims of domestic abuse, when it
Yeah.
actually comes down to the nitty gritty with their own staff members, if they raise domestic abuse, and I've known organisations where people have had to raise domestic abuse and they've been sacked because they've gone through domestic abuse situations because they'll say you're not reliable. Um, because of that, it annoys me and frustrates me because it's very nice that you publicise that we help mental health and we do this and we do that. But when it comes down to your actual staff members, they wouldn't give them the time all day to help them, and they'd use it as an excuse to get rid. And it's just kind of making sure that we keep the subject not a taboo, domestic abuse. We
Yeah,
talk about it, because the other problem that we face is domestic abuse is a great believer in equal opportunities. It doesn't discriminate. So the amount of conversation I've had with people where they kind of assumed, say, through my career, that I work with people from lower working class backgrounds, and I've gone, that's nonsense. One, like I say, it doesn't just affect women, it affects men. It also affects non-binary. It doesn't just affect people from working class backgrounds, it also affects people from other backgrounds,
mhm,
educated, non-educated, CEOs to students. It affects everyone. So
yeah,
we kind of need to kind of have that conversation, and rather having this stereotypical person who is seen by the media as a victim of domestic abuse, it's open to everyone because it can be anyone. I've
yeah.
got clients who run businesses, they're victims of domestic abuse. Um, it's just having that conversation and just being open to hear the conversation, because if you're not open to hear it, no one wants to have that conversation with you, because it's embarrassing in itself opening up about your personal life, something that you didn't really want to talk about or kind of show the world. And many victims, they put their head in the sand and they get on with the jobs and they put on their own mask that it's a happy smiley situation, because it's
Mm.
just easier than dealing with it head on. That's the problem.
It is, but then when they do speak out about it, they failed terribly.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
yeah,
But that's one of the reasons why I wanted our building in town centre. I didn't want it to be a poster behind a women cubicle door anymore. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
It has to be out there. We have to keep talking about it because if we don't, it there's never going to be any more awareness than what there already is there?
My worry with this though is that I want to make sure it's not a taboo. But again, the goalpost keeps moving, because as many times as we put, and I've said the same thing. You give a victim a shield, perpetrators use it as a sword. So every time we move the goalpost further to help victims of domestic abuse, perpetrators, they don't just go, "That's me, I'm done. You've got me, you've got me." They move their post further. Do you remember the Freedom Program?
Mm,
Yeah, so that was written, was it Pat Craven that wrote that? And
yeah,
she was a
yeah,
prison guard, um, and the perpetrators in the prison, they all got together and they all kind of gave each other tips and tricks how to abuse. So, well, don't do that because that will come up on that, or don't do this. Well,
yeah,
the thing is, as technology is getting more and more, and the more we are publicising about perpetrators as to what they're doing, perpetrators are picking up on it. We're
yeah,
educating perpetrators as well. So I
yeah.
can't give you the answer to say, well, do you know what? How do we solve the big picture? Because there's more to it.
I think that if laws were implemented as they should be,
Yeah,
and there were more deterrent, then it would make perpetrators think twice because, there is no deterrent. Let's face it,
yeah.
there ain't.
No,
You can basically do what you want and where it's laws because there's no policing
no,
to be able to enforce the laws. So, and are they trained enough to know the laws anyway? Because a lot of them don't.
no, no. And this, again, it's being comfortable to be able to enact it, but also not enacting it improperly. Because, and again, I stress about this because most of your viewers will have had the police called on them by their perpetrators. Most of
Yeah,
them. That will be the issue.
yeah,
And that probably is what scared them not to involve the police in their own issues, because again, it's having the laws, but it's enacting them properly. And I did some training with the police, and they said, look, there's not much we can do, because at the end of the day, um, we get told a story, we have to go on that story. And then by the time we get that person in who tells them their side of the story, it's too late. We've already we've already arrested him, and then we've had to NFA him to go, well, we can't do that. So it's just making sure that we aren't two-dimensional regards to domestic abuse. We don't take it as kind of, well, face value as to what's said, but it's also just having that conversation going, talking about it more, talking about what issues people are facing, because you've got people who know the victims of domestic abuse and you've got people who don't know the victims of domestic abuse. And until we kind of educate them to show them that what it's not acceptable, the control, the blackmail, the coercive behaviour, the physical abuse, um, until we do that, people are still going to be in their houses. And it's like with COVID. I'm sick and tired that the media said that domestic abuse increased during COVID. It did not increase during COVID. It didn't. It was already there in the background. It was just COVID was the boiling point for most people to get out, because if I don't get out, I do not know how long I'm going to be stuck in this house with my perpetrator.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
issue, and it's just kind of not accepting everything the media gives to us, and not accepting everything that's kind of portrayed to us from false victims, perpetrators.
Yeah. And I think that that is like we still got a lot of people that do believe everything that comes out on media, and it's not always right, is it? And
No,
I've done some media pieces with news and stuff, and it is heavily edited, and this is why I wanted to do a podcast, because it is real voices from
yes, yeah, yeah,
all professional backgrounds, victims and survivors, and I think it's about hearing everybody's voices from different angles and different points of view. We're not all going to agree, and we're not all on the same page.
no,
But I think majority of us are trying to sing from the same page. I think that we do need to keep voicing his
yeah.
opinions.
It's better to hear from the many rather than the few,
Yeah.
because again, if you don't hear from the many, there's loads of things I'm not experienced in. Um, I'm We have an EDI committee, and they wanted me to chair it years ago. And I said, I'm sure you don't need another 30-year-old white middle-class man to chair a committee. I don't have the experiences some people have got that actually could be beneficial to run it. So I know my limitations, and it's also knowing your limitations in yourself to go, I'm not the God's gift. I don't know everything in this entire planet. You need to learn from other people to try and solve a problem. And I've tried to push that out in my own work that I'm doing, is to say, well, look, I can't do it on my own. I know I can't do it on my own. And it's nice to have conversations like this to say, these are my own views about it, and to kind of keep the conversation going. And that's why I do stuff like this. It's not to kind of raise profile for me. It's just to keep the conversation actually going, and
Yeah.
to talk about the real issues that the family courts face. Because the amount of times I've done kind of conferences where we've sugarcoated everything and went, it's great, we're doing really good, everyone's happy, every child's
Mhm.
protected, every victim of abuse is sorted, and then I've gone in and gone, it's not really true though, is it? Because we've not done this, we've not done that, and this has happened, and this has happened, and this has happened. And then the party stops then, and then actually we get back to doing the real work of actually trying to make progress to try and help victims.